Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. It has become a cliche to blame the developed countries of Asia, especially China and India, as the major polluters. The reality is not so. As a matter of fact, these two nations, despite their antipathy, are in fact more sinned against sinning. Why is it that almost everybody blames India and China for what President Trump said filthy carbon dioxide emissions? Filthy carbon dioxide emissions are laid at the foot of these two nations, as if these two nations are responsible for all the pollution. And it's not so. As a matter of fact, it feels as though every time there's a new study about the US or the European Union needing to reduce carbon emission, there's a voice which pops up. And that popping voice asks a question: what about India and China? From anonymous accounts on social media to global leaders pointing their fingers at these two particular nations has become a common retort when discussing the needs of the chemical and the climate action and the chemicals responsible thereof. I still remember during the second presidential debate last year, President Donald Trump was challenged over a decision to leave the Paris Agreement, which was justified action because Paris Agreement has no meaning. But his response was not appropriate. He responded by declaring, look at China, how filthy it is. Look at Russia, look at India, it's filthy. The air is filthy. Agreed. Air is filthy. But who is responsible for this filth? That is a question that is often ignored. The Trump has long complained about India and China's carbon emission levels. I don't blame him because he's not the only one peddling this rhetoric. As a matter of fact, practically everybody, as I said, from a commoner on a street to a highly placed head of the government and the head of the state, they say so. You remember February 2020, the election of the leader of the Conservative Party was to take place, and one of the candidates, Peter McKay, said, we have no problem as far as Canada is concerned about pollution. And he suggested that the entirety of Canada stepped up the electricity, stopped using electricity absolutely. The emitters would be still using coal-based electricity. And if Canada didn't use electricity, it would not make any difference to the global emissions because the other countries, especially China, is setting up thousands of thermal stations every day. I do not deny the truth in the fact that the China and India are the both major emitters. China is responsible for 28% of carbon emissions. India is responsible for 7% carbon emissions. And then in the world level of pollution, China is number one, India is number three. But is the argument that simple? Not so quite. These two countries are polluting because of Western emissions are outsourced to them. You know, the way manufacturing is outsourced, the way, for example, the call centers are outsourced to India, to Philippines, to Taiwan, to Hungary, to Poland. In the same way, emissions, the pollution is being outsourced. And these are the countries which have ample resources to provide that outsourcing service. When a country's carbon emissions are calculated, we calculate only the carbon emission within the country, and typically that is so. These are known as territorial emissions. On the surface, it seems to be logical, but in reality, it's distorting the truth. Now, what I'm going to say today is going to raise a lot of hackles because the people refuse to go under the surface. Scientists would not do it because they're paid by the Westerners to keep their mouths shut. And the politicians find it convenient to find scapegoats who can be blamed. Now consider the many items you own which say made in China. The clothes that you bought were made in India or possibly Bangladesh or Vietnam, whatever, but mostly in India. And the emissions involved in these products created would be counted as China's and India's responsibility. Now, the clothes are being made for the consumption in Canada, in USA, in Europe. But they are not manufacturing it, they are importing it. And the country which is manufacturing it naturally would be causing pollution. And then you blame them. Would you stop wearing the clothes? In 2012, China emitted 1.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide market products. And these emissions of carbon dioxide, 1.6 billion tons, was only from the products exported to Europe and Americas. And this total emission is 16% of the total world emission. Steel production, for example, especially accounts for 10% of China's carbon dioxide emissions. And that steel, most of it, is exported again to West. There's no denying the fact that China's carbon footprint is very substantial. And with the coal industry representing around three-quarters of the emission. And it's also clear that along with the rest of the world, it needs to move towards a more sustainable power sources. But the significance of the fact that the other countries' reliance on China for manufacturing is often outlooked and bypassed, and this fact is a major factor which needs addressing too. There was a fire in a factory in Bangladesh and people were burned to ashes. And that factory was producing clothes for Loblaws Canada. Now, if Loblaws had not placed the order, there would have been no factory. Or if they placed the order, were they ensuring that the safety norms that would be applicable, say in Canada, would be adhered to? So if you're importing something, why can't you also ensure that the processes, not only economically, but sustainably acceptable? And this is not a new angle. You remember in 2013, a study was published, Climate Action Network published it, and it called these emissions imported emissions. And this group in France has been calling for greater emphasis to be placed on consumption-based emissions. As a matter of fact, emissions should be based on the total consumption. Now imagine, for example, I'm coming to a bit different, but then ultimately it will establish a certain point. The maximum food is wasted in USA and Canada, maximum per capita. If food is not wasted, the people in Haiti, Congo, Niger would not go hungry. The same is true otherwise if you don't consume those products which are produced causing emission, the emission would decrease. So what we have got to do is change the shift, and the emission should be based on the consumption rather than on the production. These would consider the carbon footprints of the imported goods and reduce the emission of the exported goods. This approach is believed to be more accurate, reflecting the consumption and the lifestyle choices of a country's citizens. Mr. Singh Jaspal has come. Is overpopulation in India, China adding to the pollution in those countries? Mr. Singh, you are 100% right. It is. And that's why this was the point I was coming to next. Your comment has been a sort of a forecast of my comments. If we calculate pollution per capita, then the per capita pollution in USA, in Europe, in Canada would be much higher than the per capita emission in India and China. But what we do is we total it up. Suppose India was divided into 10 countries, China into 12 countries, then they would not be that polluted. Nobody will be able to blame them. So you're 100% right. The totality of the population adds to the totality of the population adds to the totality of pollution. Yes, you're right. Now, imagine the problem is more serious when looking at the air pollution specifically. In a 2014 study, China's air was found to be fifth of the third pollutants: carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen oxides. And they were all related to goods for export. 20% of these pollutants are specifically linked for trade to the USA. So, Donald Trump is right. Air is filthy in China, but it's filthy because of US. It's filthy in India, filthy because of European Union. So responsibility is murky. Now, second point which Mr. Singh raised, size and population. The biggest population in the world is of these two countries. More than a third of the entire population, about 36% is in China and India. So, Mr. Singh, this point I was going to raise, but I must thank you for your perception. Given that the two nations produce 35% of the carbon dioxide emission, so their population is 36%, the pollution is 35%. So actually, it's less than what is there in the whole of the world. Per capita is much less. So the responsibility of India and China is much lower, even without adjusting the consumption-based emissions. Now, if consumption-based emissions are reduced, possibly these two countries would be the cleanest countries in the world. If not in reality, at least as far as the accounting is concerned. As a matter of fact, when you look at the per capita emissions worldwide, China and India are well down the list. And do you know which are the worst countries per capita? Don't be shocked. Qatar, Kuwait, UAE. Their population is very less, but their pollution compared to the population is huge. And out of the more populous countries, Australia and USA, which are out in the front, they produce 16.88 tons, Australia, and USA produces 16.60 tons of carbon dioxide per person per in 2017. So per capita was 16.88% tons, in Australia and 16.16 tons in USA. And the global average is 4.8 tons per capita. India is only 1.84 tons. So USA is 16.88 tons. India is 1.84 tons. China is 6.86 tons. So who is more polluting? China and India or USA and Europe? India in particularly gets unfairly targeted. It is blamed for everything for no reason at all. According to the Climate Action Tracker, India is just one of the 5 countries with policies which are compatible with the Paris Accord. Wind power has been a major focus in India, and in September last year, it reached 38 gigawatts of wind power. So this places India as the fourth in the world behind China, USA, and Germany. 38 gigawatts of energy was produced by the wind, clean energy. Currently, nearly 40% of the Indian electricity comes from renewable sources. And the transition to the clean energy is going in the right direction. India has reduced its emissions by 21% over 2005 level. So what it was in 2005, we are less than 21%. The renewable energy is the fourth largest in the world. And next year is going to touch 175 gigawatts. What more is required? In both China and India, grassroots environmental movements are very important. They are very successful. But when the narrative is there, these issues are not even mentioned. The narrative that the global south is uninterested in initiating the transition is a blatant attempt to erase the local and national mobilization in these countries. And that is what is unfortunate. In these countries, where people have been experiencing chemical change and environmental disaster for decades, strong movements of resistance are mobilized by the people at the grassroots level. The Chipko Andolan in India, you may remember in the times of Indira Gandhi. For possibly, nobody had thought even of the biodiversity and protecting the forest. And we had a Chipko Andolan, the men and the women and the children, they went to the forest, hugged the trees, and did not allow the cutting of the trees to the contractors. Has that revolutionary thing happened anywhere else in the world? In China, urban communities are rising against air pollution, and they're winning victories. And as I said, in India, there are huge fight against coal industry and deforestation. Let's be very clear: no country is on track to reach 1.7 degrees Celsius goal, the reduction by that. But in order to truly mitigate global warming, we have to stop blaming people or the countries which are in fact suffering for the greedy attitude of the other countries. There's little to be gained by misleading the reality and by shifting the blame to the other nations. Where are the performance parameters of the West and USA? They are absolutely not living up to the standards and the commitments they made. And their only hope is to find faults with other countries so that they can appear to be lily white, pure, pristine saints. Is a type of a colonial attitude and white man's burden, or is a human desire to blame the other for your own misfortune, whatever. But let's be clear, India and China are not at fault. In fact, per capita, they're the lowest in the world. India at least 1.6 tons per capita. USA 16.88 tons per capita. Isn't it a matter of shame for USA and for the West as a whole that they supposed to be what they are not? But shall the sense dawn? Let's hope so. Thank you.